attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dursey. I'm the Executive Director of APA Ohio and Vice Chair of the New Urbanism Division. Today, Wednesday, September 17th, we will hear the presentation, Getting Equitable Development into the Plan. For technical help during today's webcast, type your questions in the chat box found in the webcast toolbar to the right of your screen, or simply call the 1-800 number shown. For content questions related to the presentation, type those in the questions box also located in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen. We will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Coming up on your screen is a list of the sponsoring chapters and divisions. I'd like to thank all of the participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free. Today's webcast is sponsored by the Planning in the Black Community Division. To learn more about all APA chapters, visit planning.org/chapters, and to learn about the divisions, visit planning.org/divisions. Coming up on your screen is a list of the remaining webcasts for September. To register for these webcasts, visit utah-apa.org/webcast. And to log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, visit your dashboard, select Activities by Provider, select the division, Planning in Black Community, and the title. This webcast has been approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing only. Some recorded webcasts are available for distance education. For availability of that, check our webcast page at utah-apa.org/webcasts. Like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on our upcoming sessions. We have a great lineup for the rest of the year. October is beginning to fill up, and November and December are already filled. We are recording today's webcast, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube. A PDF of the PowerPoint will be available soon, we promise, at ohioplanning.org/webcast presentations. I'd now like to introduce Mustafa Ali, who will give a few brief remarks before we officially get started. Mustafa Ali has been a national speaker, trainer, facilitator, and commentator on social justice issues for over 20 years, with a specific focus on the issue of environmental justice and sustainability. During that time, Mustafa has given over 1,000 presentations, including facilitations and trainings. He has also worked with over 500 communities on both the domestic and international fronts to secure environmental, health, and economic justice. He currently serves as an Associate Director in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Environmental Justice, where he leads the communication and stakeholder involvement team. So with that, I would like to turn the sound over to Mustafa.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to share a couple of brief words with folks because you have some fantastic information that's going to be shared today about some incredible projects that have been going on and continue to go on around the country. And I wanted to also bring you greetings from Administrator Gina McCarthy. Today's webinar falls directly under one of her major priorities, which is making a visible difference in communities. And we know that that can't happen without having equitable development as a part of the community planning process. So we just wanted to say thank you to the hundreds of organizations who are participating today on the webinar. And as we move forward, we'll make sure that there are better outcomes that happen for communities because equitable development is a part of the plan. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Carlton Ely.
Thank you, Christine and Mustafa. Also, I want to thank the members of our audience for taking the time to join us today, and I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Again, my name is Carlton Ely, and I work for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the Office of Environmental Justice. I want to take a moment to state that the Office of Environmental Justice, as well as the Planning and the Black Community Division of the American Planning Association, are pleased to offer this webinar series. For almost 35 years, the Planning and the Black Community Division has been committed to the professional development of its members, making great communities happen, as well as elevating important policy issues, including environmental justice. Educational opportunities like today's webinar represent one means for advancing the priority that Mustafa Ali mentioned earlier in terms of making a visible difference within communities. Today's webinar is the second in a three-part series leading up to the 6th annual Equitable Development Workshop, which will be held January 29 in Baltimore, Maryland at the New Partners for Smart Growth Conference. The 5th workshop was held in February, and we decided a webinar series would be an appropriate way to keep the conversation going over the span of the next year. The focus of today's webinar is getting equitable development into the plan. The objective is to share how communities are advancing equitable development through local plans, policies, and strategies for the purpose of expanding the conversation about place-based solutions, supporting the economy, and encouraging community parity. I realize it's important to start out with a common definition so that everyone is on the same page. And for this webinar, equitable development is defined as an approach to meet the needs of underserved communities through policies and practices that reduce disparities while fostering places that are healthy and vibrant. Normally when I offer remarks on this topic, I tend to emphasize that history is prologue. Now, I'm not going to overwhelm you with a lot of history today. However, the soundbite message is the social implications of land use and economic development decisions have been a recurring theme in planning over the span of the past 50 years. In fact, we are approaching the 50th anniversary of Paul Davidoff becoming an active proponent for advocacy planning, which is an important precursor for today's discussion. As an urban planner who works on environmental justice, I take great interest in equitable development because I see it as a forward-thinking, sustainable approach. Although the handling of issues which align with the social pillar of sustainability have often left a lot to be desired, the outcomes from equitable development reveal what can be achieved when we are clear in setting our expectations, when we encourage collaborative problem solving, and when we are persistent in our leadership. Equitable development does not shift attention from making communities better. Instead, it results in better community outcomes, especially for underserved populations, for vulnerable groups, and in many instances, communities that may be overburdened by pollution. Now, I don't want to be too hasty in my delivery and presume everyone is having an epiphany right now. A critical question that may be on the minds of some is, why does equitable development matter? This is a good question, and I will limit myself to 3 answers. First, the solutions for making great communities happen are expansive and include concepts like equitable development. Traditionally, the hurdles to addressing social equity as we work to revitalize communities have been framing how to implement it during the planning process, visualizing the product from that process, and correcting the misperception that it doesn't slow down development. However, thanks to the tireless efforts of researchers and advocates, the creative thinking of planners and architects, as well as the compelling results of determined community builders, those barriers are coming down. Second, social priority versus economic imperative is a false choice. And research from the Center for American Progress offers an important reminder of this fact. According to the Center, 37 million Americans live below the official poverty line. At the micro level, persistent poverty translates into lost potential for children and lower productivity and earnings for adults. But at the macro level, persistent poverty can affect the nation's ability to remain competitive in a world of increasing global competition. And third, I just want to state that it is a matter of sustainability. We are a nation of 317 million people. We have citizens from all walks of life. And if we don't think critically about how to meet the needs of vulnerable populations properly, then we may fall short in ensuring that everyone has a safe and healthy environment in which to live, work, and play. I'm going to stop there because I don't want to take anything away from the presenters who are participating in today's webinar. Today we are joined by 3 experts who are leading extremely exciting projects, the Office of Environmental Justice and the Planning and the Black Community Division of the American Planning Association appreciate their willingness to offer remarks. Our presenters are Nick Norris of Salt Lake City, State Representative Harold Mitchell of South Carolina, Carolina Martinez of the Environmental Health Coalition in California. And respectively, they have aligned local quality of life goals while supporting community parity through comprehensive planning, charrettes and master planning, and land use policy changes. The presenters will wrap up their remarks by 2 o'clock approximately, and then we will transition into the question and answer segment, which will be led by Christine Dursey. Our first presenter is Nick Norris. Nick manages the long-range planning program for the Salt Lake City Planning Vision. His role in the long-range planning process is to help Salt Lake City and its neighborhoods identify what kind of place they want to be, how they want to grow, and when to know when they've actually gotten there. Nick has demonstrated an ability to help communities develop the tools necessary to implement their goals through a number of projects, including innovative approaches to community engagement, writing policy, and crafting development regulations, including award-winning performance, urban design, and form-based codes. Nick, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I want to start by just giving a quick overview of how planning in Salt Lake City is structured, particularly with our master plans. We're in the process of creating a citywide vision called Plan Salt Lake, which sets the direction for the city. The city has not had a citywide master plan, amazingly, since the late 60s. And so it's been a real challenge for us to overcome that lack of end goal that we've been looking for. We also, as part of this reinventing of our process, broke all of our other plans down into 2 different things: the element plans, which are things like transportation plans, housing plans, preservation plans, etc., and community plans. Those 2 groups of plans are aimed at helping implement that citywide vision, and equity is a key component of that vision and is incorporated in each of our plans as we update them. The primary focus is on access to needs and services, which includes making sure people can get to where the need and service is, that they can afford it, and that they know what resources are available that can help them improve their neighborhood. I'm going to use one of our recent master plan projects, which is in the final stages of adoption, the West Salt Lake Master Plan. As part of that goal, the planning process really includes a citywide goal of engaging those people who do not normally participate in the planning process. We do have a series of what are called community councils in our city that are intended to represent all of the neighborhoods. However, they don't necessarily represent our demographically who live in our city and who makes up our communities. So to do that, we set targets, we engage, and the engagement matches demographics. We want to go to where the people are already instead of trying to encourage people to come to us. And we using partners as a key component of that, and we also need to demonstrate at the end of the day that we've heard the people that we're engaging. So to start is, who is your community? In Salt Lake, there's the obvious demographics, the business community, the institutions, et cetera. The West Salt Lake plan on the graph and chart on the screen really is focused in Council District 2. And one of the things about this Council District is that, one, it is the most racially diverse area, not just of Salt Lake City, but of the state of Utah. It's a majority community. 69% of the population identifies themselves as belonging to some minority group. It's relatively young in age, 27 and a half years, and the median household income is 10 to 20% lower than it is citywide. But knowing your community also includes the not so obvious in the community. And with West Salt Lake, we had a number of different things. This community has a riparian corridor with the river that runs through the middle of it. So we had a lot of environmental groups. We had a lot of cyclists who used that corridor as well, and the trails. We had preservations. And we also had advocates. These advocates are those that are interested in improving access to health care, infrastructure that supports a healthy lifestyle, the needs of children, and other groups in the neighborhoods that are not as easily identified. So with that, we also need to look at who our partners are. We were fortunate that as we got halfway through the process, it was clear to us that we needed to rethink who we were engaging, because the people who were coming to our meetings were not representative of the demographics. So like I said, we set those goals of matching the engagement practices to the demographics. And once we made this realization, we needed to find partners. This is about the same time that we were connected to the EPA and an initiative that they were working on, the Children's Health and Environmental Justice Initiative, that really helped us identify who was out there and what the real issues in the neighborhoods were. With that, a number of partners that were already doing work in this area, Communities United, University Neighborhood Partners, which is an outreach effort from the University of Utah, and the Utah Housing Coalition were just some examples of those partners. So the key thing that happened was, the key tool that we used, is leveraging data. So as part of that, the Region 8 Environmental Justice Program, they set several goals and did several things. One, identify the most pressing health concerns, engage the community for long-term improvements, inform the participants, those people that they were engaging, in what resources were available, and then inform others, such as us, about what the issues and needs were in those neighborhoods. So just to kind of highlight some of the outcomes from what that initiative produced, it was broken down in the report into adult concerns and youth concerns, and one of the interesting side notes of this is that they are very similar. And so the big thing is the health concerns in this neighborhood. It's an area that has some of the highest rates of various illnesses in the state, and there was a number of issues with the cleanliness and sanitation, not just of homes, but properties, et cetera. And crime activity is a pretty big concern in these two neighborhoods as well. So what did we do to use the data? We needed to take the next step, so we capitalized on that work and engaged the community, utilizing Communities United as a catalyst for that. The work of CU is really the big tool that helped address the engagement issues associated with the West Salt Lake Master Plan. They knew who was out there. They already had established the relationships, and so they worked with us to provide qualitative data about community needs and the desires of connecting with undiscovered stakeholders. We worked with them to break down the planning jargon so we could understand where the people were coming from, and they could understand how the plan could help them and what resources were available. The work resulted in new expectations, not just in this community, but citywide, on how we do engagement and why we do it, which is a critical thing. So just as some examples of some of the outreach efforts that we did, we met with people in the park. The local school district has, during the summer when school's not in session, summertime lunch programs for those that need help with that. So we partnered with CU and the school programs to meet people when they were out at the park. And one of the things that was also identified in the EPA work was that these neighborhoods had the lowest consumption rates of healthy food in the area. And so we used some of our engagement budget actually, and as I guess to help out people, and we'd give them goodie bags of fruits and vegetables from local producers so that they had access to that and they could use them. And we felt it was a far more appropriate thing than having things like cookies and treats and things that are commonly found at workshops. We also went to neighborhood festivals and figured if people are already going to be there, it's easier for us to go there and piggyback off the hard work of others in the community, of creating community involvement and engagement and meeting neighbors. At the end of the process, we held what we called West SLC Fest, which is a street party where we brought in service providers, entertainment, and food with the intent of demonstrating in the neighborhood what the possibilities were and what was identified in the master plan. We had information there about the various city programs that could help everything from improving the energy efficiency of your homes and other grant programs to removing mold and cleaning up homes and things like that, how to get in touch with the right city resources to help improve the community. But we also, on a temporary basis, implemented some of the things that were in the master plans. We took a vacant parking lot storefront and converted it into a basically an outdoor restaurant for the day with food trucks, and we provided the opportunity for people to come and sit and hang out and eat and listen to good music that was produced by people in the neighborhoods. And it was a kind of a final check-in point for people to understand what was in the master plan and whether or not we had heard them. At the end of the day, we lost count, but we had well over 500 people, probably close to 1,000 people attend that event. And just for reference, our goal was throughout the whole process was to try to engage at least as many people as who voted in the previous council election, and the West SLC Fest put us over the top of that, so we had achieved our goals. It also forced us as a city to rethink how we implement our master plans, and that include a number of different things, whether it was community-driven improvements, financing improvements, other things. But the idea was that we could better weigh what the staff resource, what it was going to cost, how long it would take, and what the community priorities were, so that city decision makers had more background when it came to setting priorities, and they were thinking through a bigger picture. The community-based implementation really took on kind of a life of its own. The big thing was trying to identify how the community can fund some of these relatively small but important improvements in the neighborhood, and so we're working on setting that up right now using crowdfunding platforms and what works best for our city, so that the community really can weigh in on what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and how to help offset the cost of doing it. The second thing we did really was kind of a test of our existing processes, and the idea behind it was, if we want the community to take over and be able to do some of these smaller interventions, that we had to understand what that meant. And so we, in the planning office, actually managed a project which is a pump track. And for those who don't know what a pump track is, it's a small little bike park, essentially, very similar to a BMX park, where you can ride your bike over dirt or concrete berms and hills and through banked turns. The idea is that you don't need to pedal while you're going through it. And one of the things that we discovered is that it's really costly to do a lot of these things, and there's certain threshold points that triggers various permits, whether it's grading permits, building permits, what do you do about parking and signage and restrooms and refuse control and all of those things. And so we had to identify what those minimum thresholds were, so we weren't triggering those permits, so we could relay that off to other people. One of the key things that we heard throughout the planning process was that there were a number of entrances into the city or into this community that were either perceived as being blighted or unsafe or unsightly. This is where we built this bicycle park, was really an old rail corridor. There is a segment of a regional trail along the edge of it, and so and it's city-owned property, so we could do things. And amazingly, we were able to convince all of our risk management people and everything else that it was okay to do this type of a thing. And so we built it. We got volunteers from the community to help do it, and they're the ones who designed it and shaped it. We just helped them get the resources there to help move dirt and water it and pack it down so it could be usable. One of the interesting offsets of this is it's become a major training facility for our local police department, which addressed another need of just having that police presence in the neighborhood and at a scale that people felt comfortable with. And so the bike patrols are out there on a regular basis in and out through the neighborhood. We also realized that we had to realign a number of our other tools that we use. We did a housing needs assessment so we could understand what the affordable housing and housing choice issues were, and whether or not our regulations and policies were somehow negatively impacting that, and we're working on making a number of improvements. We aligned city and school district activities in the area so that the community centers and the local schools can have joint efforts in making sure that people have after-school activities and ways to enrich their lives. This area has a very low cost of housing, but a very high cost of transportation, which, when you combine those two, really has a major impact on households when we also have a very low or fairly low household income. And so the city did funded a citywide program, discounted transit costs. So it basically you can get a pass if you're a resident of the city for basically $1 a day, and it's good on the entire transit system in the region. We also created a city-funded grant program aimed at neighborhood-level improvements that are carried out by the community. And so with that, the bottom line, I think, is that it really changed how Salt Lake City plans for our future and how we engage our community. And with that, I'm going to change presenters back to Carlton.
Thank you, Nick. We appreciate your remarks. We appreciate the great work that's happening in Salt Lake City in order to expand the conversation about planning, as well as to rethink outreach and engagement.
Thank you.
Our second presenter is going to be State Representative Harold Mitchell, who represents District 31 in Spartanburg County and he's a member of the South Carolina Legislature. Mr. Mitchell has had a history of working with federal, state, and local stakeholders and bringing them together to be engaged in very important collaborative efforts in order to improve quality of life within Spartanburg, but more specifically within Arkwright and Forest Park communities within that city. Starting in 1998, he created the Regenesis Project as a means in order to address environmental health issues, as well as to plan the redevelopment of neighborhoods that were affected by non-compatible land uses. Under Ms. Mitchell's leadership, the Regenesis Project has leveraged more than $300 million through private and public sources for community revitalization initiatives. Representative Mitchell, we want to thank you again for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Carlton, and thank you, Christine, for inviting me to the panel. Next. If you switch my slide, I'll be saying next. Sorry about that. Just to give a quick brief overview on the Regenesis Project. The Regenesis Project grew out of a low-income environmental justice community in Spartanburg, South Carolina, with 2 Superfund sites and 4 brownfield sites. The Regenesis organization took a $20,000 EJ small grant back in 2000 and leveraged it, as Carlton stated, over $300 million in redeveloping a blighted community. Our approach was pulling a wide range of partners that sometimes you don't see from local government, industry, and elected officials, because in our local government partnership, we were able to look at this low-income community, and actually it was 3 communities that initiated around the fertilizer plant in Spartanburg, and we were able to look at, by not having the capacity as a nonprofit and a new nonprofit, we were able to partner with the city, county, the housing authority, in an MOU that the county would actually be the administrator of the grants for us that we were looking at initially. And initially with the project itself, we were designated in 2000 as one of the 15 federal interagency working group pilots, where we were able to bring in 7 federal agencies that we engaged into our project and process. Before getting that designation, the community basically organized around the fertilizer plant, which was given a clean bill of health, also with the fertilizer plant, which according to the state did not exist. And the focus attention from all 3 neighborhoods was the environmental justice indicator. And out of that, we saw that the issues were, lack of jobs, transportation, the crime, poor housing. Because of the abandoned facilities, all of this blightedness which took place there around these abandoned facilities basically created an incubator for a lot of illegal activity, which our mill village, which there was a textile mill adjacent to the fertilizer plant, this caused a tremendous amount of problems when the mill went out of business, left there with a mill village of nothing but abandoned homes that became basically crack houses. And on this side of town, it's adjacent across the street from a public housing complex, which in that area was a pretty high concentration of crack and heroin in the city of Spartanburg. Next. Because of the situation that we had there in Spartanburg, those agencies that we were engaged with, ranging from the Department of Energy, which helped us with our charrettes and planning, EPA and the cleanup, because of the impact of the fertilizer facility that you see, this abandoned facility was one of the main polluters in the community. The facility itself, with its releases, ended up there were cars that were replaced within the community, 1/8 of a mile away. The car was painted. What we found was during the initial stage of this, in the beginning, the foundation was with EPA, the environmental problems that had impacted the community. We found that there was furnace dust from Atlantic Station out of Georgia that was sent to South Carolina to dispose of their waste through the fertilizer. So it came in as a toxic waste and left out as a product from the fertilizer residuals. But this is something that grew out of the community, the distrust for local government and our state environmental agency. At the beginning of this whole process, there was total distrust of the community, because what you can see on the screen, there were no fines, no violations for this facility, which was about 7 acres in size. The facility itself sat on a 50-acre tract. But there were no fines for this illegal demolition, which there were no permits or anything given to do this. And residents in the community were fined the next week as a retaliation by the county right after that. So this grew a lot of anger within the community and residents for any type of trust whatsoever. Next. One of the things in looking at this from the project was, once we were able to, with our, as I stated, with the federal officials that were involved, we ended up with 3 federal line items for the Regenesis project, to where Senator Fritz Hollings was able to come in and help and assist with these line items that we received. This is one that you can see of a landfill that, according to the state, didn't exist. And you see there the hypodermic needles from the hospital system. Here's the housing conditions that were there in the facility, in that neighborhood, the Arkwright community as well. Next. That's the housing conditions that you would see there. Behind this trailer was the landfill itself. Next. So in the beginning, as I stated, with the partnerships, the major focus of the project was health, economic development, and cleaning up the environment, which started out with that $20,000 small grant. And we began having a series of meetings, and we actually invited through the region most of those federal partners to address our issues of what we came up with in the charrette and the planning for what we wanted to see back in that community. This community was centered around one of the projects, urban renewal, which had removed about 75 businesses, black-owned businesses in the community. So we saw at this time an opportunity that we could rebuild what was once lost with the urban renewal. Next. And so in that, the initial thing was, the charrettes and the planning, and then we went after our community health center grant, and these are the stakeholders and most of the elements of the project that we began to look at and get the input and buy-in from the community. And next, And one of the major things was once we were able to get the some of these grants in, we began to look at various components such as our 330 Health Center. Because of the health impact, it was a highly, or I would say a medically underserved area that we saw a lot of health impacts and effects from the facilities, but the lack of trust in looking at health surveys and health consultations by ATSDR, the Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry, we used Texas Southern University students that actually came in and conducted the health surveys, which we were able to use to apply for our federally qualified center. And using those students and collecting the data that they were able to collect, we had one of the top grant awards for our community health center there in Spartanburg. Next. And with being able to get the community health center, that has expanded into 5 centers where we also include our, we're taking care of the migrant health care for the upstate. We're into our school system where we have our school-based health initiative. We have a mobile unit that actually goes around to some of the rural areas as well, and able to provide dental and pharmacy, because as a 330 in that medically underserved area, low income, the discount on drugs were up to 60% as far as the discount on their prescriptions. That access road that you see was one that was put in because of the lack of transportation access into the community. The community was divided by a CSX rail line which had about 20 cars a day on it, and it blocked the entrances of coming in and out. There was an emergency preparedness drill which showed that there was a, when you talk about a worst case scenario, we ended up with a family that was burned to death in their home because the fire department could not get into the where the trailer was burning, which was, in instances, it would be about a 2-block radius that they couldn't get in. So this is how we were able to, with the Federal Interagency Working Group, get the Federal Highway and South Carolina Department of Transportation with our earmarks to conduct and build a new access road into the community. Next. We also, with our the Department of Labor job training initiative, we were able to utilize a lot of our job training, and this is our, going back to our health center. We were able to, that first picture with the health center was to use some students from Howard University to convert a small doctor's office, because we had a limited time to get up and running, as you can see there. And the center was named after Senator Fritz Hollings, and he ended up saying that he wouldn't put his name on it unless mine was on with him. So I said, I'm not going to fight a U.S. senator. So we ended up getting the first facility, which was a small facility, which we outgrew capacity within that first 6 months. Next. And then we ended up with the Physician's Care Facility, which we tripled in size there on the south side, really back into the community. Next. And so with our community health center, we, as I said, as far as expanding with the growth there, I'll jump to my Department of Labor. We ended up with our job training with this Hope 6 picture that you see here, a $20 million grant, wanting to make sure that those resources stayed into the community. So we were able to create a job training initiative that was a brick mason training class that we trained residents from the public housing to do the actual construction there at the site. Next. And with that, we were able to pull one of the residents as a model. Didn't intend to do it and use it that way, but it fell out. A young lady who had never worked before got in, got her 2 certifications, actually did some of the work on the site, and became a homeowner herself, which other residents saw that, hey, she's never worked before with 3 kids. She can do it, I can do it. So it germinated through our complex. And while we were doing that with our Hope 6, we actually became a NeighborWorks charter organization, to where we looked at a lot of our homebuyer education and training to where we had about 364 clients to complete their homebuyer education. We ended up with about 142 clients in purchasing a new home that were on Section 8. And so that is also continually growing in numbers, because that first year we were able to create a total of 42 families to purchase their homes. Next. And so with, if you go next. Okay. And this is part of went through the Mill Village, where we were able to take out in partnership with the nonprofit, the Housing Authority, we were able to build a new 202, HUD 202, and the green recreational facility was part of the planning with the community as well, that we were able to put in a $1.6 million recreational facility, green facility, that we currently have the Carolina Panthers. We received a grant from them to rebuild a multi-purpose field there, and the Marcus Lattimore Foundation, the running back for the San Francisco 49ers, was able to come in and build a new healthy playground area on the opposite side, backside of the facility. Next. And all of this came out of actual the visioning of the community, which was a major stakeholder at the table. This is one of the construction trade classes that we were able to pull people out of the community to actually put them to work. Next, because we was able to use also different techniques of training people from the community, and we took a homeless shelter, 2 classes that we were actually able to train them in brick mason training to do the foundations on the homes for the Hope 6. Our unique partner, Rhodia Chemicals, was also adjacent to the facility, which has become a huge partner in this whole dialogue, because they came in the disguise of there's no zoning in the county, so without the zoning, the residents were promised that there was going to be an apartment complex that they were going to be adjacent to. Well, the guy decided that he would sell out to this chemical storage facility, which ended up growing into Rhodia Chemicals, which is now Solvay. And there was a very hostile attitude. You stay on your side, we'll stay on our side. We ended up, because of the litigation with the fertilizer plant, we went into a dispute resolution with this chemical company and actually received more of what the community was wanting, and in compensation and benefit to the community, than we did with the litigation of the fertilizer company. Next. So with that, it's still an ongoing process with this whole project. Now, out of the 2 Superfund sites, what we're currently working on right now is converting the 2 Superfund sites into a solar farm and a textile mill, and 3 dump sites. We're creating an urban golf course there. The designer for Tiger Woods actually came in and designed a public course in this area. And when you say a golf course back on environmentally impacted areas before, what they have designed in concept was the first environmentally friendly course. And Mr. Fazio, which is one of the top golf designers in the world, that's his designer that designed this particular course, that we're going to get a LEED certification. Just like with buildings, this one is going to be LEED certified for green spaces. And we have the hook that we're tying in with Tiger Woods as a learning center, because on this former textile mill site in South Carolina, we have a huge unemployment gap, and trying to look at getting our kids into the STEM sciences and engineering. We're using that hook for the students to create this Tiger Woods Advanced Manufacturing Center, to where we'll have robotics, automation, coding, 3D printing, the whole 9 in a curriculum that we will be able to bring and train and teach our kids this trade, with actually creating a STEM school out of this learning center. So these are some of the things, and I know I'm apologize, Christine, for running over time, but it's a project that has many different elements and tracks to it that is still ongoing, and because of the lessons learned On the south side, we're currently doing the exact same thing on the north side of the city, which is currently going through an application process for one of the purpose-built choice communities. And we took that same thing of converting a textile mill into a medical school, now VCOM, the osteopathic school of medicine, that mill was converted into VCOM. And so the city has learned, as well as industry, that it was better to get involved, get engaged, and leverage the resources which have basically turned this entire community around. So, Carlton, I'll end it there because I know I'm past my time, sir.
Representative Mitchell, we want to thank you again for taking the time to share with us today, and we will have plenty of time during the question and answer period, obviously, to revisit the great work that you're doing in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And again, congratulations most recently on the celebration that occurred within your community and the 200 or so people who came to the city to learn about the impressive work that's been happening within the Arkwright and Forest Park communities within the city of Spartanburg. So again, congratulations on your work. We know that it is a very important national model, and it's also getting international attention from stakeholders in Korea as well as South Africa. Our next presenter is Carolina Martinez. She is a land use policy advocate at the Environmental Health Coalition, which is in San Diego. Carolina is responsible for supporting local residents to advocate for land use policy changes that respect their priorities, improve public health, as well as are consistent with principles of environmental justice. Currently, she is working on the implementation of a comprehensive community plan that includes phasing polluting industries out of a residential neighborhood and expanding affordable housing opportunities. Carolina, we just want to thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Okay, thank you, Carlton. I am loading the PowerPoint. Oh, it's all the way to the back. Hold on. Sorry, everyone. Okay. So, like Carlton said, my name is Carolina. I'm a policy advocate at the Environmental Health Coalition, and I'll be presenting today our work that's very rooted in community planning to advance environmental justice, specific to our experience in national cities. So, sorry, the other slide. Okay. So we are, Environmental Health Coalition is an environmental justice organization located in the San Diego region. We work in communities, in the communities that you're seeing right now, Barrio Logan, National City, City Heights, as well as in Tijuana. So we are a binational organization with a focus on communities. Today I'm going to be speaking specifically to our work in National City, and so you can see in the map we're really close to the border, about 20 minutes away, and we focus a lot of our work on the community-driven planning process to respond to community needs and improve the quality of life. So Old Town National City, as you can see right here, has a lot of issues of incompatible land use pattern. You can see here there's a lot of homes next to industrial uses. In the case of Old Town National City, we have a lot of auto-related, more specifically auto body shops. And you can see on the left, and that's something that I'm going to point to in the future of this presentation, is that there's heavy industrial use west of the 5 freeway. And so historically, this community has been a residential community. National City is San Diego's second oldest city. And in the 60s, the city made a big push for the auto-related industry. We have a lot of importing cars through the mile of cars. And so that's what led to this incompatible land use pattern. And just like many other communities, we are a community of color, low-income community, and all those other issues, lack of access to higher education, unemployment. So all those indicators concentrate right here And so you can see right here in the picture a home, what it looks like, a home next to an auto-related business. And because of that, we have a higher average compared to the county on asthma rates, or kids being hospitalized because of asthma complications. And just so you get a picture, sometimes I walk through the neighborhood for like about an hour, and my throat burns just by walking through the neighborhood. So imagine what it's like to live there 24/7 and go to school there, and how it impacts your life. And so just like in the many communities where we work at, and I'm sure everyone in the audience, we're trying to find solutions, how to address many of the issues that we are confronted with, and how do we do that in the planning, through the planning process. And so, because that's the other thing, planning could be very, very foreign to our community members. And so what we did when we started working here in National City, and the way we work here at Environmental Health Coalition, is to make the planning process accessible to our community members. So we have a leadership training program where our members learn the planning language. And then, so in 2005, when we started working here in National City, we conducted a community survey. So identifying community priorities, community needs, and see how we could integrate that in the planning process. So in 2005, the community identified the need to phase out industrial uses, to bring back the residential character of the community to Old Town National City. But also, so there's issues of incompatibility, but then there's also issues of affordable, lack of access to affordable housing. So they said we need affordable housing, and then they said we want to maintain this community for us. So what are some of the mechanisms that we could use to ensure that all the benefits are coming for the community that we're actually working with? And so they said, well, so we figured out, well, what about limiting the height of the buildings? So we limited, so they said, well, why don't we limit it to 3 floors? And then the other thing that came up out of that survey was limiting the incoming of new housing next to the freeway, because we know homes that are next to the freeway are highly impacted. So at least 500 feet away from the freeway. So when we started working here in National City back in 2005, we started doing a lot of research. This is one of our biggest tools. How do we transform data and make it accessible to the general public? And mapping has been one of those things that just paints a very clear picture that there is an issue going on here. So what you see here is a footprint of National City, and then a footprint of the Old Town community compared to the rest of National City, and a concentration of hazardous sites located in the Old Town area. So this just really easily makes a picture that there's an issue going on here. There's an equity issue that needs to be addressed. So we worked a lot on that, on how to organize data and make it accessible to the general public so that we could use that to educate and create awareness. And then we also work a lot with our council members, doing a lot of relationship building, education, and exposing them to the issues that the community is bringing up. So fast forward to 2010, the community was able to advance a community plan that represents the community priorities. The community plan is now, the area is zoned for residential or residential-friendly uses. There is an affordable housing project coming in. The height of the building was limited to 3 floors, and then there was a buffer placed on for new housing along close to the freeway, so at least 500 feet. So it was a huge victory. This community plan that was approved in 2010 brings a lot of opportunities to the community, economic development through the affordable housing project, and But the most meaningful part is that it is about community engagement and how that that is leading us to creating win-win situations where we have economic growth and benefits for the community, and that it represents the interest of the community for the community that needs to stay. Sorry, so my slide is not changing. Okay, so when we have community, one of the issues that we confronted is that when we create community plans, usually you are addressing the future. And so we were thinking, okay, so how could we change the past? These are images from an explosion of an auto body shop back in March. And this just paints a very clear picture of the issue of having incompatible land uses. It could have easily happened next to the school. And so we came across a tool called the amortization. It's a tool that allows you to phase out non-conforming uses that have been grandfathered in. And so we were able to identify this tool, and it has been used in the past to phase out liquor stores or undesirable uses. And we were able to pass an ordinance back in 2006 that then complements the 2010 community plan. And so we're in the process of implementing that ordinance right now. The city received back in 2010 recognition through the partnership with EPA, HUD, and DOT for a sustainability pilot community. And so they received technical assistance funding that provided the city opportunity to hire a consulting group to put together this formula for the amortization so that it makes sense the way we inform the decision-making process on what are the businesses that are going to be phased out first, or facing that, or having to go through the amortization process. So this is a formula, and as you can see, it's very complicated, but it's very, the idea is to be very thorough and analytical about how this process is done. So this is the amortization ordinance that I just spoke about. Oh, sorry, I'm going back. And then, so this is the site of the affordable housing project. We expect to see initiation of construction early next year. It's a 200 affordable housing unit. As you can see, there's two images, the current site and then the site plan. So on the left, we're going to have an open space area with a community garden, and then on the right, you're going to see the housing units. And the interesting part about this project is that we were able to protect the creek, because a lot of times communities are confronted with you either get housing or you either get open space and protection of natural resources. And so the community said, no, we want both. We need both. And so this is the picture of what we're going to see in the future. And the community is very, very excited. So the other thing that we're working on right now, Environmental Health Coalition received a grant from EPA to do an area-wide planning, received the area-wide planning grant. And so in 2008, the city at the time, the state of California had redevelopment funding, and the city commissioned a feasibility study for an industrial park. The idea would be to create a hub of this auto body or auto-related businesses away from the community, but it's still being able to keep that in the community at the right location. And so this was back in 2008 when we had redevelopment funding, but as many of you know, redevelopment was dissolved. And so EHC submitted an application for an area-wide planning grant 2 years ago so that we could bring that concept back and do an analysis of how we could make that possible with the current funding reality. So we were awarded the grant, and we're now working on this concept of locating, creating a plan. How could we make this concept feasible based on the funding that is existing at this time? So we're on that process right now. We're looking at a brownfield site west of the 5 freeway, as you could see, where the heavy industrial uses are located, away from where the homes are at the Old Town community. So finally, I wanted to introduce, I won't be able to show this, but we have a video where we put together all the lessons that we learned through this process, and how is it that we're able to achieve equitable development in our communities, and a lot of the different steps that we have realized through doing it that we've taken and have helped us to be successful in this process of making equitable development. And ultimately what we've realized is that it is very intentional and very committed to addressing inequality, and it has a lot of meaningful engagement to bring in the community. And as a result, we have sustainable communities that are also bringing in economic development. So just to recap, this is the toolbox, that some of the tools that I mentioned, the leadership training, the community-based research just to understand community needs and really address those, and educating decision makers is key. And then finally, the amortization or phase-out ordinance of non-conforming use. So that's that. Thank you so much.
Excellent, Carolina. Thank you very much for taking the time to participate in the webinar. And also, we congratulate the Environmental Health Coalition, because not only have you been using great tools over the span of time that you've been working in San Diego and National City, but you've also reached a point where you're also developing tools which serves a means in order to synthesize the many lessons associated with your experience. And for those who have not had an opportunity to see the video that Carolina mentioned at the end of her presentation, I offer this as a shameless plug for the Environmental Health Coalition to please take a moment to go online when you have an opportunity to access the video, Creating Healthy Neighborhoods, which was prepared by the Environmental Health Coalition just within the span of the past 12 months. We're about to start the question and answer segment of today's webinar. It is currently 2:05. This portion of our webinar will be facilitated by Christine Dursey. And I just want to state before we start the question and answer portion of today's webinar is that the third webinar in our series will be held on November 12. It will be on the topic of environmental justice, a new model for planning in underserved communities. Again, we want to thank you for taking the time to join us. And Christine, if you are ready, we will now start the question and answer portion of today's presentation.
Great, thank you. And just as a reminder, Carlton, if you could go ahead and show your screen, it'll have everyone's contact information up so that throughout the course of the Q&A, if anyone has any questions in particular for specific speakers, they have everyone's name listed. Okay, so this first question, we'll jump right in, is for Nick. The first plan that addressed equitable development, well, I guess this could be for anyone, actually. The first plan that addressed equitable development was the Policy Planning Report adopted by the Cleveland City Planning Commission in 1975 under the leadership of Norman Krumholtz, the planning director, who I actually had the opportunity to study under in graduate school. My question is whether the panelists think that state planning enabling legislation should be amended to require consideration of equitable development as part of the development of the Master Comprehensive Plan. What kind of requirements should the legislation contain?
I think that's a kind of an interesting question. At least in Utah, we have a one, we're a very conservative state, and land use planning is probably not at the viewed as being one of the key things that cities do. And I think that there's a little bit of backlash towards it in general at the state level. So I think ideally it would be, because a lot of times these issues especially in an urban environment where we have multiple cities transcend city boundaries. And so it's difficult to get some of these issues that exist on one side of a street and also exist on another side of a street that may be in a different jurisdiction. And so I think at a regional level, there needs to be a little bit more emphasis placed on it.
Would anyone else like to comment?
Yes. This is Harold Mitchell. I'd like to comment. We actually passed the first environmental justice piece of legislation that I introduced based on a very conservative state. It passed without reference, and due to the fact of the economic impact that many of the members of the General Assembly saw, the impact in Spartanburg regarding health, the housing, and what we actually did out of that, there was a recommendation to look at creating a commission, which ran out of time last year, but we're going to reintroduce that Equitable Redevelopment Commission that we're looking at for the state. There are a couple of things that are going on, and I think when you bring in the key partners and stakeholders, building that coalition to get something passed, it's just if you can get those best practices as to looking at local government, municipal association, bringing all of those key partners together, it would help you foster an atmosphere to get that legislation passed. And if something like that can pass in a conservative state like South Carolina, looking at equitable development and environmental justice and the brownfields, the whole redevelopment conversation that's going on right now, I think it's one that we're not taking advantage of currently, I think, in some of the states. It's almost impossible to fight this thing by yourself or try to stand to the side, because you're going to have key policy components addressed and changed in order to see this work come to pass.
Thank you, Harold. Anybody else?
This is Carlton Ely. One point that I do want to acknowledge, over the span of time that I've had an opportunity to research projects and to write about some of the great work that is happening around the country, is what I've found is that in many communities, you can either be implicit or you can be explicit. And what we often find is that if you are explicit, it actually helps to make sure that there is a clear focus in terms of the issues that need to be addressed as it relates to equitable development. It moves the conversation from being something that's abstract to something that's more tangible, to something that focuses more so on a more concrete focus in order to resolve issues that residents or stakeholders care about. And so it's important for people to understand that sometimes implied goals will not manifest themselves. And so in terms of responding and acknowledging that, often what we find is the fact that the communities that tend to be a little bit more explicit in terms of acknowledging that advancing goals of equitable development or advancing goals of environmental justice is one of the very important first steps that needs to occur in order to put them on the right path in order to realize or have these outcomes made manifest.
Thank you, Carlton. Great. So, does anyone else like to make a comment before we move on to the next question? Okay. I think the next two questions are specifically for Nick. This question, they're interested in what the public water concerns were and how they were addressed and incorporated into the plan. Nick, I think that was still you speaking on that topic.
Yeah, so the primary public water concerns dealt with two things. One, I mentioned the Jordan River that runs through this community. It's a locked waterway, so it doesn't have an outlet other than a lake, and it's also, we're at the downstream end of it, and it runs through a lot of environmental, a lot of industrial areas that create both point and non-point pollution sources, and they all end up down our river in our city. So that was the primary concern, is how can we look at that river and waterway as a regional asset and help improve that. And then two, because of the relatively flat terrain where this neighborhood and community is, there's a lot of standing water issues as well. And so whether it's with mosquitoes and other types of situations that come from that. So making sure that we're identifying those and mapping those and getting the right resources out there to address those types of health concerns. A third major health concern was just the river itself, and people wanting to make sure that their kids were safe when they were using the trails and the parks that the river runs through. And so that's one of the places where we had some difficulty in trying to balance, one, we didn't want to put fences up along the river, but we also wanted to make sure that obviously people were safe, and so that's something that the plan is working on and identifies ways to make the riverway safer for people and to address some of those areas where it might be dangerous just by the design of the trail and sidewalks that cross over the river and bridges, etc.
Thank you. Next question, Salt Lake City. While you mentioned that this is a low-income neighborhood, there are no economic issues mentioned in the neighborhood surveys. In my experience, these issues are usually at the top of resident concerns. Any ideas why good jobs, affordable housing, etc. were not mentioned?
They are mentioned. I think that they didn't come out well in those in the report in terms of how they were presented, but they certainly are there. One of the big things we heard is the connections and access to jobs. There's just not a lot of them in this neighborhood, and having the right training and investment in the education system in the neighborhoods is also a major thing. So those things are identified in the plan and they're brought out. They were something that we heard across the board, no matter who we talked to. And so one of the things that we are trying to do as a city on our end is to align our economic development tools in those areas and get the infrastructure in place to help support job growth and good job growth, and also working with our local school district, which is a separate entity from the city, in finding ways to improve the education system at the very bottom level all the way up. And one of the key partners in this is also bringing University Neighborhood Partners, which links the University of Utah and several of their departments into the neighborhood to help do things like provide training and resources, et cetera, that can help get people prepared for the types of jobs that are easily accessible to the neighborhood.
Thank you, Nick. Next question, Salt Lake and San Diego. Do you expect gentrification, or is the pollution too bad to get more well-to-do individuals to move in and invest?
So this is Carolina. Yes, we are seeing that happening already. So where there is like the limit on the height of the buildings, we hope will limit the influx of higher income communities into the very low income community. So it's something that we foresee happening, but we're trying to actively work with the community and continue to monitor the implementation of the Westside Specific Plan so that we could ensure that the community that is existing right there at this time benefits from all those improvements.
I think in Salt Lake we expect some gentrification, but we expect it to happen probably a few years down the road, talking probably 10 plus years, primarily just because of all of the other characteristics of this particular area of the city. One of the advantages that it does have is that it's very, very close and easy to get to other parts of the city from, but there's a lot of barriers to doing that, and trying to address those barriers is a key thing. As I'm sure many people are aware, Salt Lake has a fairly large and serious issue with wintertime air pollution, just given our geography and climate and the trapping of low-level pollution at close to the ground where people live. And this is the lowest part of the valley, and so they are faced with it, and that is one of the main reasons and contributing factors to some of the health concerns that we have in that area. And that's one of those things where it's really a regional issue. We can't do it on our own, and we have tried for a couple years now in a row to get the state legislature to authorize more local control and regional control over some of the air quality issues that we face.
Thank you. South Carolina, what was the main agent of the South Carolina case? Was it a bottoms-up approach?
Yes, the bottom-up approach was the case that we brought in, because we brought in all of the evidence, and we did it in such a way to where we addressed the environmental concerns, the health concerns, because we were not on anyone's radar screen, and the county administrator, city manager, being afraid that we were going to raise expectations in which local government didn't have the resources to address the number of issues we had between the environment, housing, healthcare, the crime. The crime was one that I did mention in our one of the partners, the Department of Justice, with our weed and seed. We were able to address that and reduce the crime, as the public safety director stated, by some 92%. And it wasn't just moving people from our community to another. It was actually being able to help get them trained and get into the job market. Those that didn't want to, that continued to feel that they could do the kind of illicit things that they were doing, well, they met their match until they got in and got rehabbed in the system. But we were able to save a lot of the people that were in the community that were impacting. So I would say, yes, the bottom-up approach is the best approach in doing this, because top-down, there's not a clue as to some of the things that are not on the radar. But I will say, when we actually had our meetings with the local government, business and industry, and the community, we saw in one of those processes in our charrette that the goals actually lined up. They were just said differently, but we actually had the exact same goals, which were eye-opening. That was one of the slides on the PowerPoint that showed those the second meeting we had after the interagency working group.
Thank you, Harold. The next question is for Carolina. How did the community come to the decision to limit the structures to 3 stories? Did the community take into account input from developers about whether this made financial sense?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part of the question.
How did the community come to the decision to limit structures to 3 stories? Did the community take into account input from developers about whether this made financial sense?
Yes, so at the time, what was happening in the community is that the city had already planned to bring the type of development that was going on in downtown San Diego, which is high-rise buildings and a lot of gentrification. So the picture of just imagining the high-rise buildings here in Old Town National City just clearly send a message really quick to the community that it wasn't for them. So there was some research done on how to ensure that it was going to create growth for the community, but at the pace that that would be appropriate for that community to stay and preserve its character. And so at the time, it was decided, the community did some research, and all the stakeholders came together, and it was agreed that limiting the height of the buildings to 3 floors would be enough growth for the community that would still bring economic development, but not so much that it would create displacement.
Thank you. Next question, and this is for any of our panelists. What recommendations would you give to planners regarding making environmental justice a higher priority for local jurisdictions, given the significant costs that appear to be involved with such plans? And again, this is for anyone.
I guess I'll chime in a little bit. This is Nick Norris. I think probably one of the biggest recommendations is, yeah, there's high costs associated with many of the things that are needed to address environmental justice issues, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't consider them and put them in plans and identify them. I think one of the things that we often get caught up in is that we're not those decision makers, but we need to give those people who control the purse strings and identify the priorities and control budgets, et cetera, some options and some real analysis of what those issues are and what the benefits of doing it are.
Thanks, Nick. Anyone else for this particular question?
I think, not to sound repetitive, but a lot of it is really community engagement in the process and providing the tools for residents to really advocate for themselves and understand the issues so that it's no longer a question of issues that need to be addressed, but how do we address them? And how do we find the financing mechanisms to bring those resources to the community? Because it becomes such a clear threat and obvious issue that needs to be addressed.
Carolina and all the speakers, this is a good point. We've been talking about community engagement and being proactive. How are any of you working to ensure communities continue being proactive on these issues when the programs move to address the next neighborhood or location?
I think that's a key thing, and one thing that is necessary to kind of build the long-term commitment to the community and that trust and that's needed from the community towards particularly local governments. I think one of the things is aligning those tools and making sure that those tools are available and that it's a continuous outreach effort of letting the community know what tools are available to them and not just simply moving on. I don't know if it does anyone any good to have a burst of activity over a 2 or 3 year period and then nothing else until you come back for the next round of updating a plan, which may be who knows how long down the road, 10 or 20 years away. So I think that the implementation aspect of the plans really is, at least in Salt Lake, is something that's done by a lot of the divisions that are outside of the planning office. And so whether it's our housing, neighborhood development, or economic development, making sure that you're participating with those groups so that they continue to have some presence in those communities.
Christine?
Thank you. Anyone else for this question?
Yes, I would echo Nick's comment, but I would stress the importance of having the community involvement process up front clarified. And sometimes you could, people would say, or local governments would say community involvement, but that's just on paper, and that actual stakeholder input and involvement that needs to be there and being able to report back, to the community in various aspects, I think is very important of getting that clarity up front, because if it's not done up front, getting into that process, you'll have some that feel that there are tiers of the stakeholder engagement and process that, they may get left out in some key decisions of determining the fate of the initiatives.
Yeah, as a nonprofit organization, for us, whenever we commit to a community, we're there to stay for the long run, because we understand that once you pass this amazing community plan, it becomes, the implementation is as complicated and could be just as, let's see, threatened as the process of advancing a community plan that really represents the residents' vision. And so because of that, we know that once we initiate a process of working in a community, we're there to stay for the long run. So, for example, in Barrio Logan, we've been working for at least 25 years.
Thank you. The next question is for any of you. This is sort of subjective. Do you personally think that equitable development also reaches into the topics of disability, age, and sexuality? If so, how do you include these groups in planning conversations? So I guess the first half is, do we consider disability, age, and sexuality as part of this equitable development conversation? And if so, how do we include them? So this is, again, for any of our speakers.
This is Carlton Ely. I think one of the points that I would like to offer in responding to that question is the fact that over the span of the past 15 years, there have been a number of place-based initiatives that have tended to focus on issues of priority, whether it be how to make communities more creative, whether it be how to meet the needs of segments of the market that are trying to choose between living in suburbia versus living within cities, or even how to deal with encouraging proper placemaking that may be responsive to underserved populations and vulnerable groups. There are many initiatives that focus on universal design, which has been an initiative or a focal area that has been gaining traction. And certainly when it comes to issues of equitable development, it's important to make sure that we are responsive to some of the issues that have tended to be treated as peripheral. Obviously, over the span of the past 50 years, there has been a major challenge in the sense of how do we be responsive towards meeting the needs of underserved populations and vulnerable groups and making sure that we position them to be proactive in guiding the changes that occur within their communities rather than reactive. Obviously, a lot of that conversation over the span of the past 15 or so years has been about trying to make sure that we address the issues that often are left at the fringes or left on the periphery. And so much of the conversation has been how do we make sure that we empower citizens so that they can enter the economic mainstream and make sure that we create communities that are whole.
Thank you, Carlton. Anyone else?
Yeah, I could share some of the experiences that we've had. So we have a community action team for the City of National City, and this is a group of 10 to 15, mostly women. Most of them are in their early 30s, but we have, it's been interesting because for the last 2-3 years, the number of women that are in their senior years is increasing. And we're talking mainly immigrant communities, Spanish speakers, that have never participated in the planning process before. So it's been very interesting to see them engage in advocating for themselves and learning that process. And it's been very informative because when we talk about, for example, implementing a Safe Routes to School project, and one of the women that participates, senior, she talked, about how important it is, the fact that she no longer walks around the neighborhood because it's not safe for her to cross the street. So getting that perspective to the group and then ensuring that message gets to the implementation of that project was very important, and for her to speak on her own on what are the needs as being because of she is a senior citizen. So that's one example.
Kathleen? Christine?
Yes. Anyone else?
Yes, I was going to. Yes, I was going to just add that in our project in the very beginning, the project was basically led and driven by residents of the community who were, I would consider, as far as in saying seniors, who led this effort. And so it was a thing that we ended up having to take that senior population to engage the younger members of the community to get engaged and get involved into the process. And since from there, building that capacity, we were able to elect our vice chair from the community to city council. And so from that, they began to see the power of the numbers and the impact that we had. So it hasn't been a thing of trying to get them involved. It's been a thing of really once they saw the low-hanging fruit. You know, we have a county council member that we elected as well, and I was not an elected official during that time, but I ended up running for the State House out of that district. So the community sees that the importance of having someone speak on from their behalf come from the community. So that is a lesson that they have learned, is having that advocate be from the community that is representing.
Great, thank you. All right, well, it looks like we're reaching our 2:30 time. So I just wanted to say on behalf of the Webcast Consortium, thank you to our speakers, Nick Norris, Harold Mitchell, Carolina Martinez, and Carlton Ely for coordinating this and the Planning in the Black Community Division. Thank you. Carlton, do you have any closing remarks?
No closing remarks from this end, with the exception that we will see you on November 12th for the third webinar in the series entitled Environmental Justice, a New Approach to Planning in Underserved Communities.
Great, and we look forward to it. So everyone, thank you, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.